Like, this isn't just like a local rumor thing. Like, it's either already public or shortly will be public that, like, people in Washington, D.C. are discussing him as one of the heads of the mob. So it's not just Milwaukee police harassing him. It's bigger than that, and it's definitely, like, in the public consciousness.
Okay.
And Milwaukee, always important to stress, Milwaukee is a small town. You know, it's a big small town, but it's a small town. So, like, people don't not know things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't go around and even today, he's been deceased for 30 years, and people still know his name.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like it wasn't a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely, like, it's a big part of the public consciousness. We have no this is the chief speaking. We have no information of any Chicago crime syndicate operating here or having any influence on Milwaukee activities. Neither do we have any knowledge of a Milwaukee underworld or about any bonds between Balistrieri and the crime chiefs of Kansas City and Chicago. We conducted an intensive investigation in 1957 and again in 1961 and found nothing to indicate a financial tie-up on record between Balistrieri and out-of-state interests. There likewise is no police evidence that Chicago gangsters linked to Balistrieri have established themselves here as loan sharks and jukebox racketeers, as reported by Sandy Smith. I don't know what he's getting at here. We know this is false. We know that he definitely has a direct link to Chicago and Kansas City. Like, that's not really in question.
But I think, doesn't he say, maybe I misunderstood it, but don't they say no financial connection?
Yeah, I think this might be, like, again, he's being careful with how he phrases it, because we couldn't find a financial tie-up on record, which, if you take that literally, that's like, we didn't find a piece of paper where both of their names are on something owning it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the literal way to read that. And, like, that's a super strict, narrow thing to be looking for.
Yeah, but I mean, just because obviously Frank Balistrieri knows people from Kansas City and knows people from Chicago. But I mean,
yeah,
there's nothing illegal about that.
No, there's nothing illegal about that. They have
to prove, and I think it almost sounds like what he's saying here is he's trying to calm down the thought that the Chicago Mafia is coming up to Milwaukee and taking over with the help of Frank Balistrieri.
I think that's fair.
Which I mean, for the most part, we know is probably not very factual whatsoever. There was never a time where, you know, Chicago was pushing into Milwaukee, correct?
Right.
I mean, it was pretty much always separate.
Right.
So
yeah, it is kind of funny because the chief, he has to play it like both ways. He has to play where on one hand, his detectives are working hard, they're doing their job, they're getting to the bottom of things. But on the other hand, he has to say, hey, Milwaukee's safe, there's not a problem, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And the same I mean, you can use that for anything, like, you know, let's say meth. Right? Like, on the one hand, like, if you're like the chief of police, you got to tell the city, like, hey, we got guys out there every day. They're busting the meth dealers. We're keeping things good. On the other hand, you have to say
meth isn't really a big deal.
You have to say this city doesn't have a meth problem. Your kids are fine. Don't
Right.
worry about it. You can sleep at night. So, like, while you have to say it's safe, you have to also acknowledge you are actively combating a problem that you don't have. So yeah. And I don't blame the chief. I'm actually really surprised that he even would go on the record about this kind of stuff, like admitting the intelligence files. Like, why would you do that? Mm-hmm. That's weird.
I think the only reason why he probably did that, and you read the articles, right?
Yeah.
So can you tell in the article, did the reporter directly ask that question? Because I think that's the only way he admits to that.
It is mostly very direct, specific questions. Yeah.
So that would be the only way I would see him, because, you know, if you're directly asked that question, you can't really lie, because that could come back to bite you in the future.
Yeah.
So,
and the only other piece is that the chief pointed out that the city ordinance, as it existed, as it passed in 1958, so like 5 years earlier, all jukebox operators must be licensed and fingerprinted and must be residents of the county. So the point he wants to stress here, one, they're fingerprinted, meaning these guys do not have a criminal background. But two, because they're residents of the county, they're clearly not guys from Chicago coming up and pushing in. They have to have Milwaukee residents to be an operator in Milwaukee. I have no idea what the current ordinance looks like. I have to feel this has been loosened up.
Yeah, you would think so. Because this really isn't an issue. We're not worried about Chicago coming up and taking over the gaming industry in Milwaukee anymore.
Right.
They probably already have for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, and I'm not super familiar with the rules in Milwaukee, but I do know where we live in Northeast Wisconsin. There's a certain company, which I shall not name, but it's really easy to look up, that pretty much runs all the jukeboxes and game equipment throughout the entire Northeast Wisconsin area. So they're clearly not confined to county borders up here.
And I'm assuming they're probably not even really based in this area, right?
No, they are. They're in Menasha.
Okay, so they're like headquarters in Menasha.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay, so the biggest question I have with this is, and I'm just hearing your notes. And I didn't read the articles, but
the article is very close to the notes. Like, I mean, I didn't really cut stuff.
But based on what you have in your notes, it sounds like, would you say both of these people were so heavily coached before going into these interviews?
Maybe.
You know what I mean? Because
I wouldn't say that the chief was coached. I think the chief, part of being a police chief is you are a politician. You know, you wouldn't normally say that a police chief is a politician. It's a weird thing to say, but you know that you kind of are because you're the public relations guy and whatever. So I don't think he had to be coached. I think he knows how to handle the media.
Yeah, it just seems like, just the way he treaded lines.
Yeah.
Both of them treaded lines, but just went far enough to like get a point across, but not too far where they could get themselves
now, whether
in trouble.
Frank was coached or not, I don't know. He is not someone who often talks to the media. I mean, he talks more to the media than he probably should, but it's not like he's regularly out there. But whether he was coached or not, or he's just been doing this long enough that like he knows what he has to say. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. And that could be, it's just, they both could just be very elegant in their ways of doing things.
Yeah, it's just, it is funny to me that like these, it was like 2 front page giant, like these articles are long.
Mm-hmm.
And because I cut out all the part where they talk about their background and all this, and I cut all that out. People were like fascinated with this. They really wanted to read about it. But like, again, I'm going to stress this one more time. You boil this down, and what they're accusing him of is owning something that his name isn't on. And it isn't that he's trying to hide that. Oh, you secretly own Gallagher's. Like, he's going to be like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. Like, no, dude, like, he admits it. Like, yeah, my brother owns it. I hang out there all the time. So it's like, it's not like it's super secret. It's just because of licensing issues, he can't put his own name on it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a weird thing. And there's like, I don't even think that's that weird. I have an uncle and he's still alive. So normally I don't talk about living people, but I don't think this is a big secret. So I think I could say it. I have an uncle and, he used to own a bar. Everybody knew it was his bar, but the license was in his wife's name because he had a criminal conviction. So he could not own the tavern license.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's uncommon.
Yeah.
I think that's extremely common.
Yeah.
So, like, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, he's got a hidden interest in the bar. Like, no, everybody knew it was his bar.
Mm-hmm.
He just couldn't be licensed for it.
Yeah. And it's just weird that do you know what kind of turbulent, like, what was going on at this point in time that would make him go to the newspaper and say, like, because he's kind of going there saying, like, look, this is the deal. Leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
What would have been going on that he would have been getting so much pressure